The sharp command sliced through the evening air like a blade. Hands up. Don't move. Amani Carter froze, her heart slamming against her ribs so fiercely she thought it might burst. Just moments ago, the 18-year-old was strolling home through the vibrant, bustling streets of Washington, D.C., her mind buzzing with dreams of Howard University, her future gleaming like a beacon on the horizon. Now, she stared down the barrels of police guns, accused of a crime she didn't commit. Fear coiled in her chest like a living thing, tightening with every second as she raised her trembling hands, her eyes pleading for someone, anyone, to listen. But the officer's cold, unyielding glares told her a brutal truth: they'd already judged her guilty. Then they found it, a badge tucked deep inside her backpack, its gleaming CIA emblem catching the fading light. Gasps rippled through the precinct. Jaws dropped in the courtroom. What happened next would unravel a web of corruption, expose a broken system, and spark a fight for justice that no one saw coming. This is the story of Amani Carter, a young black woman who turned the tables on injustice and proved that one voice, no matter how small, can change everything. Buckle up, because you won't believe where this journey leads. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss a story this powerful. Amani Carter was no ordinary teenager. At 18, she was a senior at Benjamin Banneker Academic High School, graduating with top honors and a full scholarship to Howard University, her dream college nestled in the heart of D.C. Her infectious smile and razor-sharp mind made her a standout, whether she was dominating the debate club with her fierce arguments or acing AP Physics with effortless precision. Teachers called her a prodigy, classmates admired her quiet confidence. But Amani carried a secret that set her apart: a CIA internship badge, earned through a high-potential outreach program designed to recruit exceptional young minds. The badge, tucked discreetly in a hidden compartment of her laptop pouch, was more than an ID. It was a symbol of her ambition, a promise of the life she was building, a career serving her country and breaking barriers as a young black woman in intelligence. Amani's journey to that badge hadn't been easy. Growing up in a modest Brightwood apartment with her single mother, Davina, Amani learned early that nothing came without hard work. Davina, a nurse who worked long shifts at the local hospital, instilled in her daughter a fierce determination and a moral compass that never wavered. "You're destined for greatness, Mani," Davina would say, her voice warm but firm. "But greatness comes with responsibility." Amani took those words to heart, excelling in school, volunteering at community centers, and dreaming of a future where she could make a difference. The CIA program was her golden ticket, a chance to use her analytical genius to serve her country while proving that kids from her neighborhood could rise to the top. On that fateful April afternoon, Amani left school later than usual, her backpack heavy with textbooks, physics, calculus, U.S. government, and that precious pouch. She'd stayed behind for an emergency debate club meeting, her passion for truth and justice shining as she argued her team's case with fire in her eyes. The meeting ran long, and by the time she caught the number 7 bus, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across northwest DC's busy streets. The ride was quiet, the hum of the city fading as dusk painted the sky in hues of pink and orange. Amani stepped off near Brightwood, just blocks from home, her thoughts drifting to dinner plans with Davina. Maybe they'd celebrate her Howard acceptance at their favorite family restaurant. A rare treat for the mother-daughter duo. Then, chaos erupted. Around the corner, 3 police cars blocked the street, their red and blue lights pulsing like a warning. A rundown convenience store Amani passed daily was swarmed with officers, their voices sharp with accusation. She quickened her pace, hoping to slip by unnoticed, her stomach knotting with unease. She recognized the tension in the officers' postures, the angry shouts she couldn't quite make out. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Cautiously, she tried to skirt the commotion, keeping her head down, but a shout stopped her cold. "Hey, you! Girl in the hoodie! Hands up!" Amani's heart lurched. She wasn't wearing anything suspicious, just a faded black hoodie, jeans, and her backpack slung over one shoulder. Standard Amani attire. Still, fear pulsed through her veins like electricity. She raised her hands slowly, her eyes darting for anyone who might intervene. A few onlookers stood at a distance, recording the scene on their phones, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. 2 officers approached, hands on their holsters. The older one, Officer O'Donnell, his name tag glinting under the streetlights, fixed her with a steely glare that made her skin crawl. His partner, Officer Marston, younger but no less menacing, barked, "What are you doing here?" I am just going home." Amani stammered, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. "I live a few blocks away." O'Donnell's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "We're looking for suspects in a robbery that happened earlier." "You matched the description." Confusion flooded Amani. "Robbery?" She'd been at school all day, her teachers, classmates, even the bus driver could confirm it. She opened her mouth to explain, but Marston cut her off. "Don't argue," he snapped, his tone dripping with disdain. Before she could process what was happening, he yanked her arms behind her back, snapping handcuffs on her wrists. Pain shot through her as the metal bit into her skin, and she winced, panic clawing at her chest. She remembered Davina's warnings, drilled into her since she was old enough to understand. Keep your voice steady. Don't make sudden moves. They might see you as a threat. But nothing could have prepared her for this moment, the world tilting as her freedom was ripped away. O'Donnell rifled through her backpack, tossing aside her physics textbook, her lunch container, her notebook filled with debate club notes. His hands moved with a careless aggression, as if her belongings were evidence of guilt. Then he found the laptop pouch and pried it open. His fingers closed around the CIA badge, and his brow furrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before it hardened again. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, holding it up like it was contraband, the emblem glinting under the streetlights. Amani's voice shook, barely above a whisper. It's a government internship ID." O'Donnell snorted, his lips curling into a sneer. "Fake. You think we're stupid?" He pocketed the badge, ignoring her protests. "We'll sort this out at the station." As Amani was shoved into the back of a squad car, tears stung her eyes, hot and unstoppable. The door slammed shut, the sound reverberating like a judge's gavel, final and unyielding. Her dreams, Howard, the CIA, her meticulously planned future, teetered on the edge of collapse. She tried to breathe, to tell herself this was a misunderstanding, that they'd check her school records and let her go. But as the car pulled away, the flashing lights painting the alley in disorienting reds and blues, Amani saw the life she'd worked so hard for slipping through her fingers. She could already imagine the headlines, though no one would care enough to print them, promising honor student charged in robbery. Her worst fear pulsed in her mind. She'd become another statistic, another name on a long list of people of color unfairly detained, or worse. The precinct was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and cold metal. Amani sat on a bench, her hands still cuffed behind her back, her cheeks damp with tears she couldn't wipe away. The cuffs dug into her wrists, a constant reminder of her powerlessness. Officers O'Donnell and Marston strutted by, sneering or ignoring her entirely, their boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Hours dragged on with no answers, no phone call, no hope. Amani clung to one thought: this is a mistake. They'll check my alibi and let me go. She repeated her mother's phone number in her head like a mantra, a tether to the world outside: 20255554937. She could recite it in her sleep, a small comfort in the chaos. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, the air thick with tension. Other detainees shuffled in and out, their eyes hollow or defiant. Amani felt their stares, sensed their curiosity about the young girl in the hoodie, but she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, afraid to meet their eyes. Her mind raced, replaying the moment she was stopped, searching for what she could have done differently. Should I have walked a different route? spoken softer. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't have mattered. The officers had seen her, a young black girl in a hoodie, and that was enough. Finally, Detective Morgan, an older black woman with a weary but kind expression, approached. Her eyes flickered with something that might have been empathy, though her voice was professional. "Let's get you processed, Miss Carter," she said, unlocking the cuffs. Amani's wrists ached as she rubbed them, the red marks a stark contrast against her skin. She was fingerprinted and photographed, the lights overhead making everything feel surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The camera's flash burned her eyes, and she blinked back tears, trying to hold herself together. Morgan gestured to a phone on a nearby desk. "You can call someone after this." Amani's hands trembled as she dialed her mother's number, each ring stretching into eternity. When Davina answered, her voice warm but tinged with worry, Amani's composure shattered. "Mom, they arrested me," she choked out, her voice breaking. "Arrested?" Davina's gasp was audible, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Amani, what happened? Where are you?" The words tumbled out in halting bursts, the false accusations, the robbery, the badge. Amani could hear the panic in her mother's voice, but Davina's tone turned fierce, a lioness protecting her cub. "Stay calm, baby. I'm coming. I'm calling Mr. Klein." Mr. Klein was a family friend, a local lawyer with a small practice who'd helped the Carters with legal matters before. Amani clung to the hope that he could fix this nightmare, that his calm expertise would untangle the mess she was in. But as she was led back to the holding area, the officers' questions grew relentless. O'Donnell and Marston interrogated her in a small, windowless room, their voices sharp and accusatory. They insisted an eyewitness had seen her near the crime scene, acting suspiciously. They mocked her CIA badge, calling it a cheap fake and tossing it onto the table like it was a prop from a prank. No matter how many times Amani explained her school schedule, her perfect attendance, her debate club meeting, the bus ride home, they dismissed her. "We'll do this the easy way or the hard way," O'Donnell growled, leaning so close she could smell the coffee on his breath. Amani's throat tightened, her mother's warnings echoing louder now. She wanted to assert her rights, to demand they check her alibi, but fear held her back. She nodded mutely, her eyes fixed on the badge, its emblem a cruel reminder of the future she might lose. By midnight, exhaustion and fear had hollowed her out. Her body ached from sitting on the hard bench, her mind a whirl of what-ifs. Detective Morgan slipped her a bottle of water and a pack of chips, a small act of kindness that felt like a lifeline in the cold, sterile precinct. But even Morgan seemed skeptical, her gaze lingering on Amani as if trying to decide whether she was just another troubled teen. Amani's worst fear gnawed at her. She'd become another name on a long list, her dreams erased by a system that didn't care. When Davina and Mr. Klein arrived, Amani's relief was palpable. Her mother burst into the visiting area, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually neat braids frayed from worry. She looked frantic, her hands trembling as she pressed them against the plexiglass barrier. "Mani, oh my God," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. Amani tried to smile, but it wobbled, her own tears spilling over. Mr. Klein, a middle-aged white man with a kind, intelligent demeanor, stood beside Davina, his briefcase in hand. He leaned close to the glass and whispered, "Don't say anything without me present." Amani nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Mr. Klein demanded to see the evidence, but O'Donnell's responses were vague, references to an eyewitness and suspicious behavior with no specifics. The store's security footage? Under review, they claimed, but Amani suspected they were stalling because it wouldn't show her at all. Her perfect attendance record, her teacher's statements, the bus driver's log, all could prove she was nowhere near the crime scene, but the officers refused to check. Mr. Klein's jaw tightened, his frustration mirroring Amani's own. "This is a mistake," he said firmly. "We'll clear it up." But the nightmare didn't end. Amani was formally charged with robbery and scheduled for arraignment in a few days. The weight of those words crushed her, a physical force that made her chest ache. As she was led to a cell, Davina's arms reached for her, only to be stopped by a uniformed officer. Amani broke down, sobbing into her mother's shoulder, the warmth of Davina's embrace the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "I'm innocent, Mom," she whispered. "I swear." "I know, baby," Davina said, her voice fierce. "We're gonna fix this." The steel door clanged shut behind Amani, the sound echoing in her chest like a death knell. She sank onto a bench in the holding cell, arms hugging her chest in a vain attempt to protect herself. The cell was cramped, the air thick with the scent of sweat and despair. Other detainees, all adult women, eyed her curiously, their faces a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Amani was technically an adult by a few months, but she felt like a child, small and powerless. She kept thinking about the CIA badge, its emblem burned into her mind. If she could just contact someone at the agency, maybe this could be cleared up. But she recalled the secrecy agreements she'd signed, the warnings from her liaison, Ms. Harrington, to keep the program confidential. Would the CIA even acknowledge her? Would they protect her, or distance themselves to avoid scandal? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant companion in the endless night. Amani tried to rest, but sleep was impossible. The cell was cold, the bench hard against her back. Every clank of keys or shuffle of feet jolted her awake, her heart racing. She thought of Davina, alone in their apartment, probably pacing the floor, unable to sleep. She thought of Howard, the acceptance letter framed on her bedroom wall, now at risk of being revoked. She thought of the CIA, the internship she'd worked so hard for, the training modules she'd aced. The promise of a future that felt so close yet so far. Nightmares swirled in her mind, headlines branding her a criminal, her name erased from the agency's roster, her life reduced to a cautionary tale. She fought back tears, not wanting the other detainees to see her weakness, but they came anyway, silent and unstoppable. 2 days later, Amani sat in the back of a sheriff's van, her hands cuffed in front of her, en route to the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse in downtown D.C. The grand building loomed ahead, its marble facade a symbol of justice she no longer trusted. She'd spent 2 nights in county lockup, a harrowing experience for an 18-year-old who'd done nothing wrong. The other detainees whispered about O'Donnell and Marston, their names spoken with a mix of fear and anger. "They've done this before," one woman muttered, her voice low. "Pick on kids like us, make up stories to boost their stats." Amani's anger simmered, a new resolve forming. If she got out of this, she vowed to expose them. To make sure no one else suffered like she had, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, drawn by a high-profile political scandal on the docket. Amani prayed they'd ignore her. The last thing she wanted was to become a media spectacle. Her hoodie and jeans were gone, replaced by a plain gray jumpsuit that made her feel like a number, not a person. She was led into a sterile hallway, where she waited with other detainees, their faces etched with resignation. Davina was in the gallery, Amani knew, and Mr. Klein would be beside her. She tried to steady her breathing, going over the facts in her head like a debate club argument. "I was at school all day. I have witnesses, teachers, students, staff. The store's cameras should show I wasn't there. The CIA badge is real." But a horrifying possibility lingered. What if the CIA refused to confirm her internship? What if they kept her at arm's length to avoid publicity? She was on her own unless the agency stepped up. Finally, her name was called. Amani was escorted into the courtroom, her heart pounding so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She glanced around, spotting Davina in the first row, her eyes swollen from crying but resolute, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mr. Klein nodded at her, his expression one of silent encouragement. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a commanding presence, asked Amani to approach with her counsel. The assistant district attorney, Ms. Branson, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, laid out the charges with chilling confidence. The defendant, Amani Carter, is accused of participating in an armed robbery at the convenience store on 3rd and Jefferson. An eyewitness placed her at the scene, and she was found fleeing the vicinity shortly after the crime took place. We request that the charges move forward and that bail remain denied, given the suspicious nature of the government ID found on her person. Amani's pulse roared in her ears. Armed robbery? She'd never touched a gun in her life. The words felt like a physical blow, each one stripping away a piece of her future. Mr. Klein stepped forward, his voice clear and resolute. Your Honor, this is a grave misunderstanding. My client maintains her innocence. She was in school for the entire day, engaged in supervised activities. We have more than a dozen individuals willing to testify to that fact. Furthermore, the ID Ms. Carter carries is not a fake. She is enrolled in a legitimate government internship, which can be verified. Ms. Branson raised an eyebrow, shifting her gaze from Mr. Klein to Amani. Verified by whom? The defendant refuses to name the contact who provided this so-called CIA badge. Amani's stomach clenched. She tried to tell the officers about Ms. Harrington, her CIA liaison who oversaw the high potential outreach program, but Harrington had made her sign documents promising never to reveal program specifics without prior agency approval. Amani had called Harrington from jail, leaving a desperate, whispered voicemail, but there was no response. The judge tapped her gavel lightly, her expression unreadable. I will not deny this is an unusual situation. However, Ms. Carter is only 18, has no prior record, and appears to have strong ties to this community. I'm inclined to grant bail if the defense can provide credible verification of her identity and internship. Mr. Klein cleared his throat. We request a small recess, Your Honor, so we may gather additional verification. The judge considered for a moment, her eyes scanning the courtroom. Very well. We'll reconvene in 2 days. Ms. Carter will remain in custody until that time unless the defense can provide immediate proof of her CIA affiliation or an surety bond. Next case. With that, Amani was guided out, tears burning her eyes. Davina tried to rush forward, but security held her back. Amani's heart sank further. She was so close to freedom, yet still locked in a cage. Every passing day felt like another piece of her future crumbling. Back in the holding area, she rested her head in her hands, trying to block out the humiliating clangs of the jail cell gate. She had to find a way to get someone from the CIA to intervene. She worried the agency might not want to draw attention to a minor operative, an intern with minimal clearance, but she had no other option. Her break came late that evening. A guard woke her, his voice gruff. Visitor. Amani rubbed her eyes and shuffled to the visitation room. Behind the plexiglass sat Ms. Harrington, her CIA liaison, in a crisp navy suit, her hair pulled into a tight bun. Amani's breath caught, relief flooding her as she slid into the seat and lifted the phone receiver. Amani, Ms. Harrington said, her voice subdued but steady. I just heard what happened. I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. Amani pressed her free hand to the glass, tears spilling over. Thank God you came. They think I robbed a store. They won't believe my ID is real. They're charging me with armed robbery. Her voice cracked, the weight of the words breaking her. Ms. Harrington's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger in her eyes. I'm going to do what I can. This is a delicate matter. I've been authorized to confirm your internship to the judge, but that's about it. This isn't how we like to handle such issues, but your freedom is more important. She paused, scanning Amani's weary face. You should never have been arrested in the first place. Amani exhaled, tears of relief threatening to overwhelm her. She wanted to reach through the glass, to grab Harrington's hand, but the barrier held firm. Thank you, she whispered. Please hurry. The next day, Amani was informed that Ms. Harrington had provided a formal affidavit verifying her involvement in the CIA's high potential outreach program, including a redacted acceptance letter. Mr. Klein demanded an emergency hearing, and the judge, swayed by the official documentation, granted bail. Amani emerged onto the courthouse steps, enveloped in Davina's fierce embrace, the warmth of her mother's arms a balm to her battered spirit. Reporters milled around, snapping photos for the high-profile political case, but Amani kept her head down, shielding her face. She just wanted to go home, to take a hot shower, to sleep in her own bed. But even as she walked away with Davina, Amani knew it was far from over. The official trial was scheduled for the following week, and the fight for her name, and her future, was just beginning. That evening, Amani sat on their worn living room couch, Mr. Klein seated across from her and Davina, a stack of paperwork spread out on the coffee table. Davina offered Mr. Klein a cup of coffee, and he accepted with a tired smile, stirring in a spoonful of sugar. "Here's the plan," Klein said, his voice gentle but firm. "The prosecution is building their entire case on this alleged eyewitness, plus the fact that you were near the store at the time. We'll counter with your school attendance, statements from teachers, and the fact that you only got off the bus near the store by coincidence. We'll show the time logs from the bus route, the sign-out sheet from your debate club meeting, everything. We'll also emphasize Ms. Harrington's affidavit proving your CIA internship is real, which diffuses their argument that your ID was fake. What we need, however, is to poke holes in their eyewitness's story. The store cameras were allegedly broken, so there's no direct video evidence. That makes the eyewitness even more critical. If we can discredit them, the prosecution's case might collapse." Amani listened intently, her eyes flicking between Mr. Klein and Davina. Her mother squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of support. Amani's heart pounded at the thought of going through a full trial, with testimonies and cross-examinations, but she knew it was her only shot to clear her name. Another question loomed: her CIA affiliation. The agency had helped secure her bail, but Amani didn't know how much further they'd go. Ms. Harrington had warned her to keep the badge hidden from the media, but Amani feared that once she took the stand, everything would be laid bare. The tension weighed heavily, a constant pressure in her chest. Still, a surge of resolve coursed through her. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom now, she was fighting for her future. For the principle that justice should not be derailed by prejudice. She also knew O'Donnell and Marston had to be held accountable, though she wasn't sure how to make that happen. For now, she vowed to clear her name and then find a way to expose their corruption. The day of the trial arrived in a haze of tension and hope. Amani woke up that morning, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. She dressed in a simple navy blouse and black pants, Davina fussing over her hair to ensure every curl was in place. The ride to the courthouse was silent, save for Amani's shaky breathing and Davina's anxious fiddling with her purse. Outside the courthouse, Amani spotted the same gaggle of reporters. Still focused on the political scandal but now noticing her. A few recognized her as the teen CIA impersonator, a sensational headline some tabloid had run. Flashes went off, and Amani ducked her head, pressing forward into the building. Mr. Klein greeted them in the hallway, his expression calm but determined. "Ready?" he asked, though he could see the fear in Amani's eyes. She nodded, swallowing hard. The courtroom was moderately full, a mix of spectators, reporters, and court staff. Amani glimpsed Ms. Harrington seated unobtrusively in the back, her presence a sliver of reassurance. The judge entered, and everyone stood, the air thick with anticipation. Once seated, Ms. Branson wasted no time, delivering a confident opening statement that painted Amani as a cunning young woman who'd lied about her government credentials, exploited her youth to evade suspicion, and orchestrated a robbery that netted thousands from the convenience store's register. Amani's hands balled into fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. The accusations were lies, each one a dagger aimed at her future. Ms. Branson called Officer O'Donnell to testify, and he took the stand with an air of righteous indignation. He described how Amani was loitering suspiciously near the crime scene, how she attempted to flee, and how she produced a fake CIA badge upon questioning. Amani's blood boiled. She hadn't loitered or fled, she'd been walking home, calm and compliant, terrified of escalating the situation. O'Donnell's narrative painted her as hostile and deceptive, a caricature of the truth. Next, Ms. Branson called the eyewitness, a middle-aged man named Travis Brown. He stepped forward, wearing a rumpled shirt, his eyes shifting nervously. Amani studied him, her heart thumping. She'd never seen this man before. With prompting from Ms. Branson, Brown claimed he saw Amani dash out of the store right after the robbery alarm sounded, his voice faltering but insistent that Amani's mind reeled. This was a blatant lie. She'd never been inside that store, not that day or any other. When Mr. Klein had his turn, he cross-examined Brown with measured intensity. "Mr. Brown," he began, his voice calm but piercing, "you claim you saw my client, Ms. Carter, exiting the store right after the alarm, correct?" Brown nodded vigorously, refusing to meet Amani's eyes. "Yes, that's correct." "What were you doing in the area at that time?" Klein asked, flipping through a stack of papers. Brown hesitated, his fingers twitching. "I was just walking by. I'd stepped out for a smoke break from my job at the auto shop down the street." Klein's eyes narrowed slightly. "The auto shop, Goodwin's Garage, correct?" Brown nodded. "Yes. It's closed on Mondays," Klein said, his tone deceptively casual. A murmur spread through the gallery. "The day of the robbery was a Monday, Mr. Brown. Care to explain?" Brown swallowed hard, his face paling. I mean, it was the day before that. The timeline is. I might be mixing up the days." He stammered, glancing at Ms. Branson for help. The assistant DA shot him a warning glare, but the damage was done. The cracks in his testimony were visible to everyone. Klein pressed on, relentless. "So your statement to the police, that you saw Ms. Carter on Monday, the day of the robbery, was inaccurate? Or perhaps you never saw her at all?" Brown floundered, his words tripping over each other. The gallery buzzed, and Amani felt a spark of hope. Klein then introduced Amani's airtight alibi, signed affidavits from her teachers confirming she was in class all day, statements from classmates who saw her board the bus after the debate club meeting, and a transit system record verifying she used her student pass at a specific time consistent with her story. The judge leaned forward, her interest palpable. Finally, Ms. Harrington was called to the stand. She verified, in cautious but definitive terms, that Amani was part of a legitimate CIA outreach program. The badge was not a fake. The hush in the courtroom was electric, the weight of her words sinking in. As Ms. Harrington stepped down, Amani felt a wave of relief and a surge of anger. The prosecution's entire case hinged on painting her as a liar and a thief, yet here was concrete evidence of her integrity. Ms. Branson, undeterred, tried to salvage her argument. "Your Honor, even if Ms. Carter's CIA internship is real, that doesn't preclude the possibility she committed this crime. We have an eyewitness." The judge cleared her throat, her eyes narrowing. "An eyewitness whose testimony is riddled with inconsistencies, and whose timeline doesn't match the day the store was open and operating. Counsel, do you have any other evidence to provide?" Ms. Branson glanced at her notes, her face tight. "At this time, no, Your Honor." The judge's gaze swung to Amani, then to the jury, and back to Ms. Branson. "In the absence of credible evidence linking Ms. Carter to the robbery, and with the defense's compelling alibi, I see no grounds to proceed with these charges. Case dismissed." The gavel's crack echoed in the silent room. Amani gasped, tears streaming down her face as the words sank in. She was free. Davina let out a sob of relief, her hands covering her mouth. Mr. Klein hugged Amani's shoulder, whispering, "It's over." Reporters in the back scrambled, snapping pictures and scribbling notes. Amani's legs felt weak, her body trembling with the weight of her victory. But as she glanced at O'Donnell and Marston, their faces grim and defiant, she knew it wasn't truly over. They had targeted her without cause, ignored her evidence, and refused to check a single fact. This wasn't just about her, it was about a system that let officers like them operate unchecked. As Amani prepared to leave the courtroom, a surge of triumph and anger mingled inside her. Spectators crowded around, some offering congratulations, others snapping photos. Amani noticed Ms. Harrington slip out quietly, avoiding notice, but their eyes met for a fleeting moment. Amani nodded in gratitude, her heart full. In the hallway, she spotted O'Donnell and Marston near the elevator, speaking in low, urgent tones with Ms. Branson. Their faces were dark, their postures tense. A memory flashed, the whispers in lockup about their history of planting evidence, using fake witnesses, targeting vulnerable people. Mr. Klein, noticing her stare, touched her arm. "It might be worth looking into," he murmured. "But let's focus on your well-being first." Amani nodded, filing the thought away. She wouldn't forget. On the courthouse steps, reporters ambushed her, shouting questions. "Ms. Carter, how does it feel to have your charges dropped? Are you really with the CIA?" Amani blinked, unsure how to respond. Mr. Klein stepped in, delivering a canned statement. Amani was an innocent young woman incorrectly identified. The justice system worked. Amani offered a quick smile, then let Davina guide her away, the camera's flashes fading behind them. Later that day, Amani curled up under a blanket on their couch, a mug of tea warming her hands. She was physically and emotionally drained, but the warmth of her own living room, the familiar creak of the floorboards, grounded her. Davina sat beside her, stroking her shoulder, the TV droning in the background. A local news broadcast popped up, the Chiron reading, "Charges dropped against teen accused of robbery, CIA internship confirmed." Amani winced at the attention, but a part of her felt a swell of pride. She had been vindicated. Yet the victory felt incomplete. The officers had targeted her for no reason, racial profiling, she suspected, or something deeper. Accountability was needed. And Amani wasn't sure how to pursue it without opening herself to new dangers. A few days later, Amani received a call from Miss Harrington. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice warm but cautious. Amani swallowed, her throat tight. "Okay, I guess. Just trying to process everything. I spoke with my superiors at Langley," Harrington said. "They're aware of the situation. The agency doesn't usually get involved in local police matters, but we want you to know we support you. You're still part of the high potential outreach program, if you want to continue." Relief washed over Amani. She'd feared her run-in with the law would derail her CIA prospects. "I do," she said softly. "I want to continue. But I also want to." She paused, unsure if it was safe to share her thoughts about pursuing accountability. Harrington cut in gently. "You have every right to seek justice, Amani, but tread carefully. Some of these local issues can be messy. If you decide to pursue a complaint or lawsuit, the agency can't officially back it, but we won't stand in your way." After the call, Amani felt a mix of gratitude and frustration. The CIA wouldn't hinder or help her, but at least they weren't penalizing her for speaking out. That night, she and Davina sat at the kitchen table with Mr. Klein, discussing their options. They decided to file an official complaint with the DC Police Complaints Board and explore a civil rights lawsuit for wrongful arrest and emotional distress. When news broke of Amani's plans, the media latched on, framing her as a hero, a young black woman and CIA intern taking on a corrupt police force. Some outlets questioned her motives, accusing her of seeking profit or stirring trouble, but Amani ignored the noise, focusing on her upcoming high school graduation and her future at Howard. Fate, however, had more twists in store. One afternoon, Amani sat in Mr. Klein's cramped office, discussing the lawsuit, when his phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then his eyes widened. "Right," he said. "We'll be right there." He hung up and fixed Amani with a serious look. "That was Detective Morgan. She wants to see you. Says it's urgent. Amani's stomach dropped. Why would the detective who'd processed her arrest want to talk now? They met Morgan at a small coffee shop near the precinct, the detective in plain clothes to avoid scrutiny. She scanned the room before sliding into a booth, her expression cautious but determined. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said quietly, leaning in. But I'm tired of watching innocent people get railroaded. I've got information about O'Donnell and Marston. Amani and Mr. Klein exchanged a look. We're listening, Klein said. Morgan took a deep breath. They're part of an informal network of officers who pad their arrest stats. They target easy marks, young black people, immigrants, folks less likely to have the resources to fight back. They get promotions, commendations, all for crime reduction. The eyewitness who testified against you? Travis Brown? He's a paid informant. They use him whenever they need a quick ID to seal a case. A swirl of nausea swept over Amani. That's how they build cases? She asked, her voice trembling with anger. Morgan nodded grimly. I've been investigating quietly, but you know how the blue wall works. I've got partial evidence, enough to raise suspicion, but not a slam dunk. If you move forward with your lawsuit and complaint, and we pool our evidence, we might blow this open. But we'll need more documentation, testimonies, anything tying these officers to misconduct. Mr. Klein rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Are you prepared to go on record with this? Morgan hesitated, her eyes flickering with fear. I have to tread carefully. My career could be on the line. But yes, I'm ready. If it means exposing their corruption, I'll do it. Amani felt a surge of admiration for Morgan. She'd initially dismissed her as part of the system, but here she was, risking everything for justice. What can I do to help? Amani asked, her voice steady with determination. Morgan leveled her gaze. Your story is key. You have proof of a false arrest, and your CIA affiliation has drawn enough publicity that if you take the stand, people will listen. Then there's Brown's perjury and their fabricated evidence. If we can find others who've gone through the same ordeal and are willing to testify, we can build a class action suit. Amani's mind whirled. The scope of this was daunting, frightening, yet exhilarating. She pictured the sleepless nights in jail, the powerlessness, the fear that her future was gone. No one should endure that for a crime they didn't commit. She made her decision in that moment. I'm in, she said. I want these officers held accountable. Let's do it. Thus began a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and late-night phone calls. Morgan provided lists of potential victims, people she suspected O'Donnell and Marston had wrongfully targeted. Some had left D.C., others were still in legal limbo, lacking the means to fight back. Amani and Davina spent evenings calling these individuals, listening to harrowing stories of intimidation, false charges, and coerced guilty pleas. Some were reluctant, fearing police retaliation, others leapt at the chance to clear their names. Amani juggled her final semester of high school, Howard orientation prep, and building this coalition, her days a blur of schoolwork and activism. The media caught wind, dubbing her the teen whistleblower, a label she hated but recognized as a tool to draw attention to the truth. The city buzzed with tension. The D.C. Police Department launched an internal investigation, and O'Donnell and Marston were placed on administrative leave, a symbolic gesture, Amani knew. She also received ominous phone calls at odd hours, no caller ID, just heavy breathing or whispered threats to drop the lawsuit. She reported each incident to Mr. Klein, who urged her to stay vigilant. Detective Morgan suspected associates of the officers were trying to intimidate her. The fear weighed on Amani's mental health, waking her most nights in a cold sweat, nightmares replaying her arrest. In some dreams, she was trapped in the convenience store, O'Donnell cornering her, her screams silent. Each morning, she fought to shake it off, reminding herself she was safe, that she was fighting back. But some traumas lingered, Ghosts that refused to be banished by willpower alone. Through it all, Amani clung to Davina's love, Miss Harrington's guarded support, and her own unwavering faith in justice. She found solace in her bedroom, tinkering with code-breaking puzzles from her CIA coursework or journaling about her ordeal. She wrote about the surreal duality of being a teenage CIA intern and a civil rights crusader, about her classmates' mixed reactions, some in awe, others wary of the attention. When graduation day arrived at Benjamin Banneker, Amani walked across the stage to cheers from her classmates and a standing ovation from the faculty. She accepted her diploma with trembling hands, tears in her eyes, the culmination of years of hard work. Yet she felt her real battle was just beginning.
In late June, Amani's civil lawsuit against O'Donnell, Marston, and the D.C. Police Department had its first major hearing. The city filed a motion to dismiss, claiming her allegations were unsubstantiated, but Amani and Mr. Klein arrived armed with statements from multiple victims, Morgan's insider testimony, and evidence tying the officers to repeated misconduct. The hearing was in the same courthouse where Amani had once stood accused. She walked those halls with her head high, wearing a crisp white blouse and black slacks, Davina beside her, radiating quiet determination. Mr. Klein carried a bulging briefcase, his expression confident. Inside the courtroom, Amani saw O'Donnell and Marston for the first time since her trial. They glared at her with undisguised hostility, flanked by a sharp-suited attorney known for defending police in misconduct cases. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Detective Morgan testified, recounting her observations of the officers' questionable arrests, including Amani's. She described their pattern of targeting vulnerable people, using paid informants like Brown, and pressuring for quick convictions. Amani took the stand, her voice steady as she detailed her ordeal, the false arrest, the ignored pleas, the dismissal of her legitimate ID. She spoke about her CIA internship, clarifying that while she couldn't disclose everything, her involvement was real, further proof the officers hadn't bothered to verify her identity. Mr. Klein presented statements from half a dozen individuals who'd faced false charges under O'Donnell and Marston's watch. Each story echoed Amani's: intimidation, lies, flimsy evidence, painting a damning portrait of systemic misconduct. The officer's attorney tried to paint Amani as a troublemaker, suggesting she was fueling a media circus, but Amani responded calmly, explaining she wanted only to clear her name and prevent further injustices. Her composure drew nods from spectators in the gallery. The pivotal moment came when the judge denied the city's motion to dismiss, citing substantial evidence warranting a full trial. O'Donnell and Marston's expressions darkened, and Amani felt a wave of relief. Justice was inching closer. Mr. Klein presented statements from half a dozen individuals who'd faced false charges under O'Donnell and Marston's watch. Each story echoed Amani's: intimidation, lies, flimsy evidence, painting a damning portrait of systemic misconduct. The officer's attorney tried to paint Amani as a troublemaker, suggesting she was fueling a media circus, but Amani responded calmly, explaining she wanted only to clear her name and prevent further injustices. Her composure drew nods from spectators in the gallery. The pivotal moment came when the judge denied the city's motion to dismiss, citing substantial evidence warranting a full trial. O'Donnell and Marston's expressions darkened, and Amani felt a wave of relief. Justice was inching closer. At the ceremony, Amani stood on a modest stage before dozens of activists, families, and neighbors. She saw tears in the eyes of those who'd endured their own run-ins with corrupt policing. "I'm just an 18-year-old, she said into the microphone, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to be in this position. But when the system tries to break you, sometimes you have no choice but to stand up. I'm grateful for everyone who's joined me in this fight." The applause was thunderous, and Amani's eyes locked on Ms. Harrington, who'd slipped in quietly. She offered a subtle nod of respect, and Amani's heart swelled. At the ceremony, Amani stood on a modest stage before dozens of activists, families, and neighbors. She saw tears in the eyes of those who'd endured their own run-ins with corrupt policing. "I'm just an 18-year-old, she said into the microphone, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to be in this position. But when the system tries to break you, sometimes you have no choice but to stand up. I'm grateful for everyone who's joined me in this fight." The applause was thunderous, and Amani's eyes locked on Ms. Harrington, who'd slipped in quietly. She offered a subtle nod of respect, and Amani's heart swelled. Amani watched their guilty verdict on TV, tears of relief mingling with bittersweet triumph. The city settled the lawsuit, offering substantial compensation to all plaintiffs and mandating reforms, stricter oversight, informant regulations, and racial bias training. Amani's share covered college and Davina's bills, but the real victory was intangible: justice served. She'd stood up for herself and her community, exposing a system that thrived on silence. Amani watched their guilty verdict on TV, tears of relief mingling with bittersweet triumph. The city settled the lawsuit, offering substantial compensation to all plaintiffs and mandating reforms, stricter oversight, informant regulations, and racial bias training. Amani's share covered college and Davina's bills, but the real victory was intangible: justice served. She'd stood up for herself and her community, exposing a system that thrived on silence. Amani smiled, slipping her CIA badge into her pocket. She'd faced injustice and won, not just for herself but for countless others. Under DC's vast sky, a new purpose ignited. One voice, hers, had sparked change. And she was just getting started. The courtroom fell silent as the gavel struck, case dismissed. Amani exhaled, the words a lifeline. She'd fought, endured, and won. The officers who tried to ruin her were facing justice, and the system that failed her was exposed. Stepping outside, the weight lifted. This wasn't just about her, it was about every silenced voice, every name denied a chance. But this is just the beginning, because when one speaks out, 100 more rise. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You won't want to miss the next one. Amani's journey proves one thing: when you stand up, the world listens. See you in the next story.